historically, what we have done is we have compartmentalized, right? That means keep that nasty, icky, personal stuff over there, show up as the superhero producer, regardless, and just kind of figure it out, okay? Well, how has that been working for us? Or, more specifically, how has it been working for our teams, our leaders, and oh, by the way, those other people in the life that we end up intersecting with? How has that been working, right? Clearly, I think we're starting to be fed the message that there are times in life when there is no compartmentalizing. In fact, I think, unfortunately, some of us have even seen that there are times when even grit and resilience aren't enough. And especially us as pioneers, as leaders, as the people who help support some of the other businesses out there, it's really up to us to start learning how to dig even deeper to that place where there is an epic version of ourselves, even when maybe we didn't even know if that existed. So I was having a conversation with Matt, and he was sharing with me just how abrupt, let's say, it can be when he shares, what is it that you do? The moment he mentions his industry, people tend to shut down. Has anyone else ever had that experience? Yeah, right? And so it really isn't, I mean, those feelings of sometimes shame, we were talking about it a little bit, those feelings of shame or frustration, all of these feelings aren't necessarily about what we haven't done, what we did do, who we're not. It really is more about who we have not allowed ourselves to be. Because in actuality, what it is that you are doing here is so critical. You help other businesses stay in business. Imagine if suddenly you weren't here, right? Think about it. You are the epic heartbeat of many, many businesses. You take away our heart and it's their life, right? So today is really about understanding that our definition of success is changing. Our definition of the new normal, it's changing. And we have the opportunity to really show up and claim, what do we want this new normal to change into? And even more importantly, who do I intend to show up being? Where 90% of us in this room run the risk of taking that last breath filled with regret. And again, I will emphasize, it is not because of something you did do or didn't do. It's who you did not give yourself permission to be while you were doing it. And maybe, just maybe, it's because you were afraid to ever allow yourself to come epically and deliciously alive, whatever that means to you. We do have a tremendous impact over how we experience our life and the world. And I'm not talking about trying to control things that we clearly can't control. But what I am saying is that there are so many things that we are led to believe that we have no clue over, that we could control, that we have been absolutely oblivious to. And when we really are striving to have that more epic purpose, that more epic experience, epic results in our life, then it leads us to two more questions. Could it be costing us the destiny that we spend our entire lives? And are we in control of how we experience our life? Or is what we are experiencing controlling us? Which leads to the next question. If you change who you show up being, how will it impact what you end up seeing? From my experience, and literally from the hundreds of professionals, C-suite executives, business owners that I have seen arrive to me feeling incredibly stuck, feeling like I don't even know who I am anymore. And I am so burned out. I don't think, even though I'm making good money, I can go one more day into that building. I have seen them by learning, just making a few simple adjustments to really not only shift that, not only achieve these epic results, but come even more alive in the process. And you know what? When they are bold enough to really dig deep and start showing up consistently as that more epic version of themselves, it actually inspires the people around them to go out there and achieve things that previously might have seemed impossible, even when there are 1,000 reasons why it can't be done. So today, we are here, aside from adding a little bit of epic into your world, we're here to really understand there is a choice that you can make that will change the results, but also change how you feel as you show up. And it is that one choice that will help you achieve more impact, influence, and even income in all aspects of your world. Who could use a little more influence or impact or income? Yes? Yes? So, that one thing is really committing to learn to play the inner game to win, right? And that really is something that I call the Epic You, the Epic You formula. It is learning to master that one thing that we cannot automate, we cannot delegate, we certainly can't eliminate it. It is our mind. So, why is there a chicken up on the screen, right? Well, to some of you, that may be a chicken. But this is the first myth we are going to bust today. And the myth is that making changes is hard, right? Or that it's even kind of silly and woo-woo and dumb, right? Well, guess what? My top leaders who make these changes, one of the reasons why they have so much fun along the way is that they learn to approach all the seriousness with what I call the booyah factor. And that is when you learn to combine, yes, that carpe diem, seize the day, but with that joie de vivre. And they're playing 1,000%. So, would it be okay if I maybe teach you first today how to dive into the rest of today with a little bit of booyah factor? Yes? As we go forward today, bring it, okay? Because this is your moment, your experience, your time to make that choice. How badly do you want to come fully alive? And really not just for yourself, but for your team, for your businesses, and for everybody else in your life. Booyah, right? So anytime when you feel like, yes, I got this, I can rock this, this is freaking awesome, I want to hear an outrageous booyah! And if you feel so compelled, feel free to run around like a mad person in the end zone. Yes! Because we will cheer you on, won't we, everybody? Yes, yes, woo! Do it, it is freaking awesome. And so, at that moment, every single one of those tourists, even the ones who thought, I'm not so keen on this, I'm a little afraid of heights, took that plunge. Well, once they took the plunge, what do you think they were feeling? Booyah, right? And so they felt like we have to do this again. And so our little daredevil and the rest of the group swims back over to the cliff face and starts making their way up the cliff. Well, this is what it felt like to be purely and blissfully alive. It was freaking amazing. Until, just like that, it wasn't. Because in that one fleeting moment, a single boulder starts catapulting off the side of that mountain, barreling down toward these tourists. What went from calm was now total chaos as everyone scrambled to get out of the way. Get out of the way! Get out of the way! Falling! Fortunately, everyone got to safety except one. And the rest of the group watched in horror as that horrible rock smashed right into the head of that beautiful young woman, knocking her off onto the cliffs below. In case you haven't guessed, that young woman was my daughter, Skylar. And that last little video was taken on her GoPro about 5 minutes before our world changed. And this is our boulder. So, how to choose to live? It's not a question that we often slow down enough to really ask ourselves, is it? And maybe an even better question is, how do we possibly find ways to come even more alive when all of these boulders keep crashing down around us? How do we decide who to be as we're coming alive? So there I was on that plane, zooming through darkness that night when I got in the call. And I don't have to probably tell you that my mind was consumed with this perfect storm of just horrible emotions, anger, grief, despair, rage. Why us? But you know what I realized as I zoomed through that sky? That by far the worst thing that I was feeling powerless to help my daughter. Now understand that this boulder had cracked open her skull. The fall had crushed her lungs, fractured her spine, fractured both scapula, snapped her right thigh, and absolutely pulverized her left ankle. I was being prepared. That reality was that these doctors were going to try to keep her alive long enough for me to come and say my final goodbye. It was devastating. And yet, as I zoomed there, thinking of how powerless I was feeling, I realized that thanks to all the other boulders that had fallen in my life, I had been encouraged to quest, to ask some what felt like sometimes ridiculous questions, right? But I started looking and immersing myself in how some people could face these insurmountable challenges and emerge as bigger, bolder versions of themselves. How did they do it? Well, they had one thing in common. One thing, always. It was that inner game. right? So I knew that there had to be a way. And one thing I can tell you, there is no better place to ask yourself some powerful questions than at 30,000 feet. So I realized, in fact, you might say I began looking at life with my real eyes. And I realized that I may not be able to control this outer game, couldn't undo the boulder, but I sure as heck could play a mean inner game. So I said, game on. And I asked myself, how much power am I willing to give this boulder, right? I mean, Sky was just 22 years old when this happened. She just graduated from Yale. She had gone all over the world. She'd been to 5 out of the 7 continents. She taught English to students in Nepal, monks in Nepal. She'd been to Africa, teaching the wee ones, teaching the adults. She had built schools. She had made the kind of an impact that most of us don't even make by the time we're 80. So was I going to let this boulder rob us of that by pushing me to define myself as the mother of a child who'd been tragically killed by a boulder? Is that what her life would mean in the context of the world going forward? Or could I take my power back and say, wait a minute, I choose who I define myself to be. My daughter was about love and life and joie de vivre. So that is what I must make this be, regardless of the circumstances. So I will show up as the mother of a child who in just 22 years made a positive impact on this planet. How's that for a booyah? I then began to ask myself some new questions. And these are 3 questions that I promise you, they serve me epically whenever those boulders start falling. And the first question is, what can I control? That's really important because most of us spend so much energy trying to control things that we have no business controlling. And it's at the expense of controlling the one thing that we're given the power to control, but we say, our inner game, our inner narrative, what we are saying to ourselves, what we are making ourselves mean. Question number 2, what can my mind believe? Because yes, our mind has to believe this, right? Speaking of money, how well do you think it works to tell someone, you know what, just go in front of the bathroom and spread your arms and go, I am a money magnet. I am a money magnet. I am a money magnet. What do you think your mind's gonna be saying? Yeah, have you checked your bank account recently? Just saying. But probably the most important question of all 3 of them, and this is where a lot of us stumble, is what am I assuming that is not necessarily true? What am I assuming that is not necessarily true, right? So in my case, assuming was to believe that just because medical precedent said, you know what, your daughter has four injuries that are typically fatal. It's kind of logical and realistic. Just prepare yourself. We're trying to be realistic here. One of them's gonna get her. So I can assume that just because there was thousands of years of medical history to support that this would be true. Or I can assume, well, what can my mind believe? Can my mind find a way to believe that maybe something else is possible? So I started asking myself some different questions. I had to start small, right? So the first question was, has anyone in the entire world ever accomplished something that everyone else said was impossible. Well, that was almost laughable because I was flying through the sky in one of those impossibilities, wasn't I? So my mind could believe that. And so I began to look at the language of my inner narrative, right? Because I realized that that is key. If I wanted to believe that a miracle was possible, I had to get my inner narrative on board. I had to find the inner narrative that would help me believe that the I'm possible was more probable than the impossible. And so that starts with the story. My biggest challenge is finding a way to help my daughter. What do you think is the most powerful word in that sentence? Well, quite honestly, there are many powerful words, aren't there? Challenge. Our words are not just our words. Every single word that we utter is a symptom of what we believe is true in the world, right? Every single one of them comes attached with an invisible story. So when we choose the word challenge, we're putting it in that same category as all those times where we tried and it was so hard. In fact, it felt impossible. And why did they do it and I can't do it, right? However, the most powerful word in that sentence, ironically, is so powerful because, again, we're completely oblivious to it. It's the word is. What? It is because it's our present tense statement. Think about it. Every single time you make a present tense statement, it is only when you believe something to be truth, fact, truth in all capital letters. And guess what? That becomes the programming code for your subconscious. And your subconscious moves and acts and responds accordingly. It becomes part of who you are. What am I assuming that is not necessarily true? And what I'm assuming is that just because, yes, that is true, that is the only version of truth. So if instead of saying my biggest challenge is finding a way to help my daughter, I were to say, my biggest freaking commitment is I'm going down to Colombia and I am finding a way to help my daughter. Booyah! That where my mind had to go was the place where there is no bright side. Does that sound strange? Think about this. Focus. What you focus on expands. Who's heard that before? Right? What you focus on. So if I'm trying to think by looking on the bright side, what am I really focused on? The big looming dark side, right? Because there would be no bright side if there wasn't such a big looming dark side that I was trying to run away from. So what I realized I had to do in order to really show up as that force to be reckoned with is I had to find real, small, believable thoughts that could get me closer. So I was able to inch my way from despair to a little bit of hope, from hope to a little bit of belief. But even belief has a crack in it. So I had to keep going. I had to find those thoughts until finally there it was. And it's a place that I can only describe as being a powerful knowing that shows up in starting to change your expectation. Some people call it faith, right? And interestingly enough, it all of a sudden began to look as if life had to conform to my vision. There was no more worry, no more doubt, and believe it or not, no more fear. In fact, in that moment, I was able to forgive things that had been absolutely unforgivable for decades. I was able to feel grateful for things that I knew I should feel grateful for, but they'd been impossible to feel gratitude for. And believe it or not, in that moment, before I even got to the freaking Colombian hospital, I was able to forgive that boulder for falling on my daughter. And maybe for the first time in decades, I was able to let go of some of my own boulders and finally start to see and understand why my daughter Skylar had been so fearless and full of life. So I arrived at that hospital truly as a force to be reckoned with. I was not the second victim of that boulder. I was going to be the leader of this team, and I was going to help those doctors see that we are freaking on target for a miracle here, gang. A miracle. Do they happen? Yes, they do. So bring it on. Thank you. But you have to participate. You can't wait for what is happening to you. It's all about you setting the foundation deliberately for understanding that you can set the stage for great, even impossible things all the time. But you can't be reactive. You must be proactive, and you must help the people in your lives do the same. That is the key to not taking that last breath filled with regret. So let's be clear. I am not saying that my inner game alone saved my daughter, because absolutely. The team here in Miami, and it's really poignant for me to be back here because this is where the miracles happened. This team in Miami and the team in Colombia worked incredible magic on my daughter. But what I am saying is, if you will be bold enough, if you will risk to shift what you're assuming, to shift how you show up being, if you will risk committing to showing up even just a little bit more epically, you tap into a different kind of magic, one that can allow you to transform your impossibles into more of those I'm possibles. Well, I never in a million years would have guessed that this boulder, the boulder of 2016, would become such a profound teacher and mentor. Talk about the school of hard knocks, right? And yet it brought with it so many profound lessons that I thought that you shouldn't have to be crushed by a boulder to experience them. And over the years, some of these lessons came together in what is now the formula that Skylar and I live by, but also now that has really helped me to transform the lives of those hundreds of clients that now are out there doing these freaking epic things, but more importantly, they're loving their life while they're doing it. Even when those boulders fall, they're going, all right, bring it on, because guess what? Sometimes our greatest opportunities arrive disguised as a boulder. So, epic, showing up epic. Here's what you don't do, right? You'll notice on this list, again, they focus in three different areas: your focus, your fears, or your language. There's one goal that we have, and that is to be taking our last breath saying, this was freaking awesome. I hope I get the chance to do that again. And everything else along the way should simply be your objective, which you iterate and play and get messy and have fun and become a more epic version thanks to that messiness. What now? What are you focusing on? What am I fearing? What am I communicating? What is next for you? Will you leave simply having heard an interesting story? Yes, there will be obstacles, setbacks, and sometimes literally boulders. So I hope that from having heard our story, that when life asks you to be the reluctant hero or to be the leader that your team so desperately needs, that you will believe that version of epicness, that epic life, it exists, not in spite of the boulders, but thanks to that boulder version of you, that these boulders inspire you to become. So how will you define yourself when we leave this room? Will you define yourself by these boulders that have left you scarred? Or will you now start to realize that these scars cry out that you were bigger and bolder than the frickin' things that have tried to bring you down? Booyah, right? We do not always get to choose how long we get to play on this planet, do we? But we do. And don't let anyone, especially you, forget this. We do get to choose how epically we live while we are playing here. So what if beginning right here, right now, you could start looking at your world with your real eyes? And what would your life look like if you could start tapping into your own inner sky and discover that it too is limitless?